The seamstress's hands trembled as she watched the sheriff nail the eviction notice to her door, the sound of hammer on wood echoing through the dusty streets of Montrose, Colorado, like a death knell in the spring of 1882. Delilah Harper stood frozen on the boardwalk, her two daughters clutching her skirts as the small crowd of onlookers pretended not to stare. She had known this day was coming ever since Thomas died 6 months ago, crushed beneath a mining cart up in the hills. The small sewing shop that doubled as their home had been barely scraping by even when he was alive, and without his meager wages from the mine, she had fallen 3 months behind on rent. "You got until sundown, Mrs. Harper," Sheriff Coleman said, his voice gruff but not unkind. He would not meet her eyes. "I am sorry, but Mr. Pemberton owns the building and he has got another tenant lined up." Delilah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She felt her eldest daughter, 9-year-old Sarah, press closer against her side while 6-year-old Emma began to cry softly. The sheriff walked away, his boots heavy on the wooden planks, and the crowd dispersed like tumbleweeds in the wind. "Mama, where will we go?" Sarah whispered. Delilah smoothed her daughter's dark hair, forcing herself to stand straighter. She was 27 years old, and she had survived worse than this. At least, she tried to tell herself that as she guided her daughters back inside the shop. The familiar smell of fabric and thread greeted them. The bolts of cloth she had been carefully hoarding, the half-finished dress on her workbench, the small living quarters in the back with their meager belongings. She had until sundown. That gave her perhaps 6 hours to figure out how to save her children from sleeping in the street. Delilah moved mechanically, gathering their clothes into the 2 canvas bags she owned, wrapping her precious sewing supplies in an old quilt. Her mind raced through possibilities, each one bleaker than the last. Her parents were long dead. Thomas's family had never approved of their marriage and had cut him off. She had no siblings, no relatives in Colorado at all. The few friends she had made in Montrose were struggling themselves, barely keeping food on their own tables. She could try to find work as a housekeeper, but who would take in a woman with 2 young children? The respectable families already had help, and the less respectable establishments were not options she would consider, not while breath remained in her body. The sun climbed higher in the sky as she worked, and by noon, their entire lives were packed into 3 bundles. Delilah sat on the edge of the narrow bed she had shared with her daughters, staring at the bare walls. Sarah sat beside her, unusually quiet, while Emma played with a corn husk doll on the floor. A knock at the door made her jump. She rose, smoothing her worn calico dress, and opened it to find Mrs. Peterson from the general store, her kind face creased with concern. "I heard about the eviction," the older woman said. "I brought you some bread and cheese. It is not much, but I thought you might need it." Delilah's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "Thank you, that is very kind." Mrs. Peterson pressed the wrapped parcel into her hands. "Have you got somewhere to go?" "Not yet, but I will find something." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. The older woman hesitated, clearly wanting to offer more help but unable to. Her husband ran the general store with a tight fist on their finances. "I will pray for you and the girls." After Mrs. Peterson left, Delilah fed her daughters the bread and cheese, though she could barely swallow a bite herself. The afternoon shadows were lengthening when she finally picked up their bundles and led Sarah and Emma outside. She locked the door one last time and left the key on the counter inside, visible through the front window. They stood on the boardwalk as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Delilah had no plan, no destination. She simply started walking, her daughters trailing behind her, toward the edge of town where the buildings gave way to scattered homesteads and ranch land. Perhaps she could find a barn where they might shelter for the night. Perhaps in the morning, with a clearer head, she would think of something. The weight of their possessions dragged at her arms, and Emma was already whimpering with tiredness, though she tried to be brave. They had walked perhaps a mile from town, the road dusty beneath their feet, when Delilah heard the sound of hoofbeats behind them. She moved to the side of the road, pulling her daughters with her, as a rider approached. The man sat tall in his saddle, his broad-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He slowed his horse as he neared them, and Delilah kept her eyes down, hoping he would simply pass by. Strange men on lonely roads were not to be trusted, especially when a woman had no protection but her own wits. But the horse stopped. "Madam, you look like you could use some help." His voice was deep and surprisingly gentle. Delilah looked up, meeting eyes the color of summer sky beneath the brim of his hat. He was perhaps in his early 30s, with sun-bronzed skin and the lean, muscular build of a man who worked hard for his living. His clothes were clean but worn, a working cowboy's outfit, and his horse was a sturdy bay mare that looked well cared for. "We are fine, thank you," Delilah said, though everything about their situation screamed otherwise. The man glanced at the setting sun, then at the bundles they carried, then at Emma's tear-streaked face. His jaw tightened. "Meaning no disrespect, madam, but you do not look fine. Are you in some kind of trouble?" "We were evicted from our home in town," Sarah piped up before Delilah could stop her. "We have nowhere to go." "Sarah, hush," Delilah said sharply, but the damage was done. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that needed cutting. He held the hat against his chest, a gesture of respect that surprised her. "My name is Xavier Owens. I run a cattle ranch about 3 miles up this road. It is not much, just me and my hands trying to build something worthwhile. But I have been needing someone who can sew. My men go through clothes faster than I can replace them, and we are all wearing more patches than original fabric at this point." Delilah stared at him. "You are offering me work, if you can sew, yes. I can offer you a cabin on the property. It is small, but it is sturdy and clean. Meals with the hands in the main house. A small wage for the sewing work. In exchange, you keep my men in decent shirts and trousers, mend what needs mending, and maybe make curtains for the bunkhouse, things like that." It was too good to be true. It had to be. Delilah had learned that life did not hand out gifts without strings attached. "Mr. Owens, I appreciate the offer, but I do not know you. I have my daughters to think of." Xavier nodded as if he had expected this response. "I understand your caution, madam. If you like, you could speak with my men first. I have 4 hands who work for me. 2 of them have wives who live in town. They could vouch for my character, such as it is. Or you could ask around Montrose about me. The sheriff knows me, as does the banker and most of the merchants." "Why would you help us?" Delilah asked bluntly. "You do not know me either." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the mountains. "My mother raised me and my sister alone after my father died. We moved from town to town, always struggling, always one disaster away from being on the street. She took in sewing and laundry, whatever work she could find. When I was 14, a ranch owner gave her steady work as a cook. It saved us. I remember what it is like to have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. So if I can help someone in that situation, I figure I should." There was no guile in his face, no hidden calculation, just honest compassion and a matter-of-fact practicality. Delilah felt something unknot slightly in her chest. "My name is Delilah Harper," she said. "This is Sarah and Emma. I am a good seamstress. My work is quality and I am fast. Then we have an arrangement if you are willing to trust me." Xavier gestured to his horse. "The little one looks tired. She can ride with me, and we will get you all up to the ranch before full dark. You can see the cabin, meet the men, and decide if you want to stay. If not, I will bring you back to town in the morning and help you find something else." "Fair enough." Delilah looked at her daughters. Emma was swaying on her feet with exhaustion, and Sarah's face was tight with the effort of not crying. They needed shelter, and this man was offering it with no apparent expectation of anything improper in return. She had always trusted her instincts about people. They had served her well in the past. And right now, her instincts told her that Xavier Owens was exactly what he appeared to be. A decent man offering help to someone in need. "All right," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Owens. Just Xavier, please." He dismounted in one fluid motion and lifted Emma gently into the saddle, then swung up behind her. "It is not far. The road is easy walking." He kept his horse to a slow walk so they could keep pace, and true to his word, it was not long before they turned off the main road onto a smaller track that led between rolling hills dotted with grazing cattle. The ranch buildings came into view as the sun touched the mountain peaks. A solid-looking main house, a large barn, corrals, a bunkhouse, and several smaller outbuildings. A cabin stood a little apart from the others, nestled against a grove of cottonwood trees. It was small, perhaps just 2 rooms, but the roof looked sound and the chimney was straight. 2 men were working near the barn, and they looked up as Xavier rode in. He called out to them, "Ben, Carlos, come meet our new seamstress." The men approached, curiosity plain on their faces. Xavier made introductions. Ben was a stocky man in his 40s with a graying beard and a friendly smile. Carlos was younger, dark-haired and lean, with a polite nod for Delilah. "This is Mrs. Harper and her daughters," Xavier said. "They will be staying in the east cabin. Mrs. Harper is going to take over mending and sewing for the ranch." "About time," Ben said with a laugh. "I have been threatening to work naked if someone does not fix my spare shirt soon." "Please do not," Xavier said dryly. "You will scare the cattle." The easy banter between them eased Delilah's nerves further. These were working men, rough around the edges but seemingly decent. Carlos tipped his hat to her. "Welcome, Mrs. Harper. It is good to have you here." Xavier showed them to the cabin as twilight deepened. Inside, there was a main room with a stone fireplace, a table and chairs, a cooking area, and a separate bedroom with a wide bed and a smaller cot. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was clean. "We use this cabin for storage mostly," Xavier explained, lighting a lamp. "But I had the boys clear it out this morning. There are blankets in the chest, and I will have firewood brought over. The well is behind the main house, and you are welcome to take meals with us or cook for yourself, whichever you prefer." "This morning," Delilah said sharply. "You cleaned this cabin this morning?" Xavier had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "I was in town earlier and heard about your eviction. I thought you might need help, so I prepared the cabin just in case." "You planned this." "I hoped," he corrected, "but I did not want to presume. If you had not been on the road, I was going to come to town tomorrow and make the offer properly." Delilah did not know whether to be grateful or unsettled. In the end, gratitude won. "Thank you. This is more than generous." "It is practical," Xavier said. "I truly do need a seamstress." "You will earn your keep, I promise you that." Ben was not joking about the state of our clothes. He moved toward the door. "I will let you settle in. Come up to the main house when you are ready, and we will get you some supper." After he left, Delilah sank into one of the chairs, suddenly boneless with relief. Sarah immediately began exploring the cabin, opening the chest to examine the blankets, peering into the bedroom. Emma climbed into Delilah's lap, her small, warm weight a comfort. "I like it here, Mama," Emma whispered. "So do I, sweetheart, so do I." They unpacked their meager belongings, and Delilah made up the bed with the blankets from the chest. They were thick wool, smelling faintly of cedar. The cot would be perfect for the girls to share, at least for now. When they ventured up to the main house, full darkness had fallen and lamplight glowed in the windows. Xavier answered her knock, and the smell of beef stew wafted out, making Delilah's stomach clench with hunger. The main house was larger than it had appeared from outside, with a good-sized kitchen and dining area, a sitting room with a stone fireplace, and what looked like several bedrooms down a hallway. It was a bachelor's household, functional rather than decorative, but clean and orderly. 4 men sat at the dining table, and they rose when Delilah entered. Xavier introduced the other 2 hands. Jim, an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes, and young Pete, who could not have been more than 19 and blushed furiously when he said hello to Sarah. The meal was simple but hearty, and Delilah tried not to let her daughters eat too fast, though they were clearly hungry. The men kept up a steady stream of conversation, mostly about ranch business, occasionally directing friendly questions towards Sarah and Emma that soon had the girls relaxing and chattering about their favorite things. Xavier sat at the head of the table, eating quietly, but Delilah felt his eyes on her more than once. When she caught his gaze, he did not look away with embarrassment. Instead, he gave her a small, reassuring smile that made something flutter unexpectedly in her chest. She firmly told herself it was just gratitude, nothing more. After supper, Xavier walked them back to the cabin, carrying a lantern to light the way. The night air was cool and the stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by town lights. "I will have supplies brought to you tomorrow," he said. "Fabric, thread, needles, whatever you need. Make me a list, and I will get it from town. You can start by looking over the clothes in the bunkhouse and seeing what needs mending most urgently." "How many men work here?" Delilah asked. "Just the 4 you met tonight during most of the year." "We hire extra hands during roundup and cattle drives, but that is seasonal. Ben and Jim have been with me since I started the ranch 5 years ago. Carlos joined 3 years back, and Pete is new this spring." "You are young to own a ranch," Delilah said, then flushed. "I apologize, that was forward of me," Xavier chuckled. "No offense taken. I am 31. I worked as a hand on other ranches since I was 15, saved every penny I could. When a good piece of land came available, I took a chance on it. It has been hard work building it up, but it is mine. Well, mine and the bank's until I pay off the loan." They had reached the cabin. Xavier handed her the lantern. "If you need anything at all, come get me. I am a light sleeper, and Mrs. Harper, I am glad you decided to stay." "So am I," Delilah said softly. "Thank you, Xavier." His name felt strange on her tongue, too familiar for someone she had just met, but he had asked her to use it. He smiled, touched the brim of his hat, and walked back toward the main house, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness. Inside the cabin, Delilah got her daughters ready for bed, hearing their prayers, tucking them in with kisses. They fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted by the day's upheaval. Delilah sat by the fire for a long time, staring into the flames. This morning, she had been facing homelessness and despair. Tonight, she had a roof over her head, food in her belly, and the promise of honest work. It felt like a miracle, and she was not sure she believed in those anymore. But Xavier Owens seemed real enough. The calluses on his hands, the sun lines around his eyes, the quiet competence in the way he moved and spoke. He was not some fairy tale prince. He was a working man trying to build a life, and he had offered her and her daughters a chance to do the same. She would not let him regret it. She would work harder than any seamstress he could have hired, prove that his faith in her was not misplaced. and she would absolutely not allow herself to think about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the gentleness in his hands when he lifted Emma onto his horse, or the flutter in her chest when he looked at her across the dinner table. She was a widow with 2 children. He was her employer. That was all there was to it, and all there could ever be. Delilah banked the fire and went to bed, but sleep was a long time coming. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Delilah woke early, made breakfast for herself and the girls, then walked up to the main house to collect the mending. The pile of damaged clothes was truly daunting. Shirts with torn sleeves, trousers with split seams, socks worn through at the heel, a coat with a ripped lining. She set up her sewing table in the main room of the cabin, where the light from the window was best, and worked steadily while Sarah helped watch Emma. The work was meditative, her needle flashing in and out of fabric, her hands remembering skills her mother had taught her when she was younger than Sarah. Xavier brought her supplies from town: bolts of sturdy cotton and denim, spools of strong thread in various colors, new needles, scissors, buttons, and other notions. He did not hover or check on her work, simply left the materials and went about his business, trusting her to do what she had promised. That trust meant more to her than he probably realized. In the evenings, they took meals at the main house. Delilah offered to help with the cooking, and Xavier accepted gratefully. The men had been taking turns at the stove, and their efforts were edible but uninspired. With Delilah in the kitchen, the meals improved dramatically, and the men were vocally appreciative. She learned more about the ranch and the men who worked it. Ben had a wife and 3 grown children in Montrose. He rode into town every Sunday to spend the day with them. Carlos was saving money to bring his mother and sisters up from New Mexico. Jim was a widower who had worked cattle his entire life and had no desire to do anything else. Pete was the youngest son of a farming family, struck out on his own to make his fortune in the West. And Xavier was the glue that held them all together, she realized. He worked as hard as any of his hands, often harder. She would see him out at dawn checking the herd, repairing fences, breaking a new horse, hauling hay. He knew every cow on his ranch by sight, could read the weather in the sky, could gentle a skittish animal with patience and soft words. He was also unfailingly kind to her daughters. He carved Emma a wooden horse that she treasured, and he brought Sarah a book of poetry from town when he learned she loved to read. He never made them feel like burdens or nuisances, even when Emma got underfoot or Sarah asked endless questions about ranching. Delilah found herself watching him more than she should. The way he moved, economical and graceful despite his size. The way he listened when people talked, giving them his full attention. The rare but devastating smile that transformed his usually serious face. She was drawn to him, and that terrified her. Thomas had been a good man, a kind husband, but their marriage had been more practical than passionate. They had cared for each other, built a life together, but Delilah had never felt this pull, this magnetic awareness of another person's presence. It was inappropriate. She was living on his property, dependent on his generosity for her very survival. She could not afford to develop feelings for her employer, could not risk the stability she had found for herself and her children. So she kept her distance as much as she could, stayed polite but reserved, focused on her work and her daughters and nothing else. But it was hard. Especially on the evening, 2 weeks after they had arrived, when Xavier knocked on the cabin door after supper. Delilah opened it to find him standing there with his hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I am sorry to disturb you, but I was wondering if I could talk to you for a moment, privately." Her heart jumped into her throat. Was he unhappy with her work? Had she done something wrong? Of course. Sarah, watch your sister." She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Xavier led her a little away from the cabin, out of earshot of the children. "Is something wrong?" Delilah asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of her voice. "No, nothing wrong. Your work is excellent, better than I hoped for. The men are happy. I am happy." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I wanted to tell you that I will be going into town tomorrow to see the banker and the lawyer. I am filing the paperwork to make your employment official, drawing up a proper contract with wages and terms. I should have done it already, but I have been putting it off." "Why?" Delilah asked, confused. Xavier met her eyes. "Because once it is official, there will be talk. A single woman living on a bachelor's ranch, even with the hands here and your daughters as chaperones, people will gossip. I wanted to make sure you understood that before we make it formal. I do not want to damage your reputation." Delilah almost laughed. "My reputation? I am a penniless widow who was evicted from her home. I do not think I have much reputation left to damage." "You would be surprised what people will say," Xavier said grimly. "I have heard the whispers already when I am in town. People wondering what the arrangement really is, if you are truly just a seamstress or if there is something else going on." Heat flooded Delilah's face. "That is absurd. You have been nothing but honorable. I know that, and you know that, but gossip does not care about truth." He looked out at the mountains, his jaw tight. "I have been thinking about this a lot over the past few days. There is a way to stop the gossip, to make sure you and your daughters are protected, both in reputation and in fact." Delilah's mouth went dry. She could not mean what she thought he meant. That would be insane. Xavier turned back to her, and his blue eyes were steady and serious. "I am asking if you would consider marrying me." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Delilah grabbed the porch railing to steady herself. "What?" "I know it sounds sudden," Xavier said quickly, "and I am not proposing because of any romantic attachment. This would be a practical arrangement, a marriage of convenience if you will. It would protect your reputation, give your daughters a stable home and a father figure. It would legitimize your presence here and stop the gossip cold." "And what would you get out of it?" Delilah managed to ask. "A well-run household, honest help with the ranch, someone to help raise cattle and children both when the time comes." He paused. "And the satisfaction of knowing I did right by you and your girls. My mother always said a man's character is measured by how he treats those who have less power than him. I want to be the kind of man who does the right thing." It was the most ridiculous proposal Delilah had ever heard. No declarations of love, no romance, just practical considerations laid out like a business contract. And yet, there was something deeply appealing about it. No false promises, no expectations she could not meet, just two people helping each other build a better life. "I need time to think about this," she said. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But I wanted to put the offer on the table before I went to town tomorrow so you could think it over while I am gone." He took a step back, putting more distance between them. "Whatever you decide, your job here is secure. This proposal does not affect that. If you say no, nothing changes. You and the girls still have a home here for as long as you want it." "Thank you," Delilah whispered, "for everything." Xavier nodded and walked away, leaving her standing in the gathering darkness, her mind spinning. Marriage. To a man she had known for only 2 weeks. It was insane, but was it really? People married for practical reasons all the time, especially out west where life was hard and survival often depended on partnership. Love was a luxury many could not afford, and if she was being honest with herself, she could do far worse than Xavier Owens. He was kind, hardworking, honorable. He was good to her daughters. He was building something solid and lasting with his ranch. He was offering her not just security but partnership, a real stake in something. The fact that he was handsome, that her heart raced when he smiled at her, that she found herself thinking about him at odd moments during the day, well, that was irrelevant to a practical arrangement. It would probably make things more complicated, if anything. Delilah went back inside the cabin, her mind churning. Sarah looked up from the book Xavier had given her. What did Mr. Owens want? Just to talk about ranch business, Delilah said, the lie tasting bitter. But she could not discuss this with her daughter, not until she had made a decision. She lay awake most of the night, weighing the options. In the morning, Xavier left early for town, and Delilah threw herself into her work, trying to quiet her thoughts with the rhythm of the needle. But by the time he returned late that afternoon, she had made her decision. She found him in the barn, unsaddling his horse. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the question in his eyes. "Yes," Delilah said simply. "I will marry you." Xavier went very still. "You are sure, I am sure, you are right that it is the practical solution. It will protect my daughters, secure our future, and I think we can build a good partnership together." He set down the saddle and came toward her, extending his hand. "Then we have an agreement." Delilah took his hand, and the warmth of his calloused palm against hers sent a shock up her arm. They shook formally, sealing the bargain, but Xavier did not immediately let go. "I will do right by you," he said quietly. "I promise you that. This may not be a traditional marriage, but I will be a good husband and a good father to your girls." "I know you will," Delilah said. And she did know it, deep in her bones. Whatever else this marriage might be, Xavier would keep his promises. They were married a week later in the small church in Montrose, with Ben and his wife standing as witnesses and Sarah and Emma as eager participants. Delilah wore the best dress she had, dark blue calico with white trim, and Xavier wore a new shirt she had made for him. The ceremony was simple and quick, and when the minister told Xavier to kiss his bride, he pressed a chaste, brief kiss to her lips that nonetheless made Delilah's heart pound. They had agreed that the marriage would be in name only, at least at first. Xavier moved a few of his things into the cabin, establishing that they shared a household, but he continued to sleep in the main house. It was an arrangement that satisfied propriety while giving them both space and time to adjust to this new situation. The gossip in town did indeed die down, replaced by general approval that the widow had found a good man to provide for her and her children. A few old biddies sniffed about the speed of the courtship, but most people seemed to think it was a sensible match. Life on the ranch continued much as before, but with subtle shifts. Delilah now helped with ranch accounts in addition to her sewing, as she had a neat hand and a head for figures. She took over more of the household management, organizing supplies and planning meals. Sarah began helping with small chores around the ranch, feeding chickens and gathering eggs, while Emma followed Xavier around like a devoted puppy whenever he would let her. And slowly, carefully, Delilah and Xavier began to learn each other. She discovered that he was an early riser who liked his coffee strong and black, that he had a wry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, that he played the harmonica beautifully on quiet evenings. She learned that he had a sister in California who wrote him long letters, that his favorite meal was pot roast with potatoes, that he had a deep and abiding love for the land that went beyond mere economics. He learned that she sang while she sewed, that she had a sharp tongue when provoked, that she was fiercely protective of her daughters and equally fierce in her determination to pull her weight. He discovered that she loved thunderstorms, that she could make a joke in the driest possible way that would catch him off guard and make him laugh, that she had dreams beyond simple survival. 3 months into their marriage, they were cleaning up after supper together, the girls already asleep in the cabin, The ranch hands retired to the bunkhouse. It was a domestic scene, comfortable and easy, and Delilah found herself thinking that this strange arrangement had become something more than she had expected. Not quite a real marriage, but more than a simple business partnership. "I have been thinking," Xavier said as he dried the dishes she washed. "Winter will be here before long, and the cabin is not insulated as well as it should be. I was planning to have the boys help me fix that, add another layer of wood to the walls, make sure the chimney is drawing properly." "That would be good," Delilah said. "It does get drafty at night already." Xavier was quiet for a moment. "I was also thinking that it seems foolish for me to keep sleeping in the main house when I have a perfectly good wife and a cabin that is supposed to be my home now." Delilah's hands stilled in the wash water. They had not discussed changing their arrangement, had both seemed content to leave things as they were. But she could not deny that she had thought about it, wondered what it would be like to truly be Xavier's wife in all ways. "The girls share the cot," she said carefully. "There is only the one bed." "I know." Xavier set down the dish towel and turned to face her. "Delilah, I need to be honest with you. When I proposed this marriage, I meant what I said about it being practical. But these past months, getting to know you, seeing what a remarkable woman you are, I find myself wanting more than just a practical arrangement." Delilah's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I have feelings for you, real feelings. I think about you all the time. I look forward to coming in from the fields because I know you will be there. I love the sound of your voice, the way you laugh, the strength in you." He took a step closer. "I am saying I want this to be a real marriage. If you would want that too, she should be cautious. She should take time to think about this." But Delilah had been cautious her whole life, and where had it gotten her? Her heart knew what it wanted, had known for weeks if she was being honest with herself. "I want that too," she said softly. "I have feelings for you as well, Xavier. I did not expect to, did not plan to, but I cannot help it." The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached for her, his wet hands framing her face, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with tears. "I will court you properly," he murmured against her lips. "We may have done everything backwards, married first and courted later, but I want to do this right." "We do not have to wait," Delilah said, surprising herself with her boldness. "We are already married. I want to be your wife truly." Xavier kissed her again, deeper this time, and Delilah felt the last of her walls crumbling. This man who had saved her when she had nothing, who had offered her partnership and then friendship and now love, she wanted everything with him. That night, Xavier moved his belongings into the cabin properly, and they became husband and wife in truth. He was gentle and patient, taking time to learn what pleased her, and Delilah discovered a passion in herself she had not known existed. This was nothing like her dutiful marriage to Thomas. This was fire and sweetness and a connection that left her shaking in Xavier's arms. Afterwards, lying beside him in the darkness, his hand stroking her hair, she felt a peace she had never known. "I love you," Xavier said quietly. "I should have said that before. I love you, Delilah." "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have for a while now." The year turned toward winter, and Delilah had never been happier. The work was hard, the days long, but she was building a life with a man she loved, in a place that felt like home. Sarah thrived on the ranch, growing confident and capable, learning to ride and help with the cattle. Emma bloomed like a wildflower, her laughter ringing across the ranch yard. And Delilah and Xavier grew closer with each passing day, learning the rhythms of partnership both in work and in love. They worked side by side during the day and came together at night with a passion that never seemed to fade. When Delilah realized she was pregnant in early winter, she was both thrilled and terrified. She had survived 2 births, but she knew the risks. Women died in childbirth all the time, especially out on remote ranches far from doctors. Xavier was overjoyed but also worried, and he insisted on hiring a woman from town to come stay with them as Delilah's time approached. Mrs. Morrison was a midwife with decades of experience, and her presence eased both their minds. The baby came in late summer, a long, hard labor that left Delilah exhausted but triumphant. When Mrs. Morrison placed the squalling infant in her arms, Delilah looked down at her son with overwhelming love. "He is perfect," Xavier said, his voice choked with emotion. He touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger, his eyes bright with tears. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking at her husband's face, Delilah knew. "Thomas," she said. "After my first husband who gave me my daughters, and his middle name can be Owen after you." Xavier kissed her forehead. "Thomas Owen Owens, I like it." The baby was healthy and strong, and Delilah recovered quickly. Sarah and Emma were enchanted with their new brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help care for him. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and more chaotic with an infant in the house, but rich with love and purpose. The ranch was doing well, Xavier's hard work paying off in increased herd size and improved land. They were able to hire 2 more permanent hands and build a larger bunkhouse to accommodate them. When Thomas was 2 years old, Delilah found herself pregnant again. This time she was less frightened, more confident in her body's ability to bring a child safely into the world. Their daughter arrived in spring, another healthy baby with Xavier's blue eyes and Delilah's dark hair. They named her Rose, and she was a serene baby, content to be held and cuddled, easy to please. The years passed in a blur of work and growth and love. Sarah grew into a lovely young woman, serious and bookish, who eventually caught the eye of Pete, Xavier's young ranch hand who had become like family over the years. When Pete asked permission to court her at 18, Xavier gave his blessing, and 2 years later, they married in the same church where Xavier and Delilah had spoken their vows. Emma proved to have a gift with horses and took over much of the ranch's horse training operation, working alongside Carlos, who had become her mentor and friend. Thomas and Rose grew up strong and healthy, learning the ranch business from their earliest days, as comfortable on horseback as on their own feet. Through it all, Delilah and Xavier's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, as any couple does, but they had built something too precious to let conflicts tear apart. They worked through problems together, always coming back to the foundation of respect and love they had established. On their 10th anniversary, Xavier surprised Delilah by taking her into Montrose for a rare night away from the ranch. He had arranged for Sarah and Pete to watch the younger children, and he took her to the finest hotel in town, an extravagance they could now afford but rarely indulged in. Over dinner, he took her hand across the table. "Do you remember when I first proposed to you? I said it would be a practical arrangement, nothing romantic." "I remember," Delilah said, smiling. "You were very clear about that." "I was an idiot," Xavier said. "I did not know it was possible to love someone as much as I love you. These 10 years with you have been the best of my life. You took a chance on a cowboy who did not even know how to properly court a woman, and you made me the happiest man alive." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "You saved me and my daughters when we had nothing and nowhere to go. You gave us a home, a family, a future. How could I not love you?" "We saved each other," Xavier said. "You made my house a home. You gave me a family. You are my partner in every way that matters." That night, in their hotel room, they made love with the passion and tenderness of longtime lovers who knew each other's bodies and hearts intimately. And Delilah thought back to that desperate day 10 years ago when she had stood on the road with her daughters and no hope, and a cowboy on a horse had stopped to offer help. She had not believed in miracles then. She did now. The years continued to unfold. Sarah and Pete gave them grandchildren, 3 boisterous boys who loved visiting the ranch. Emma eventually married a horse trader from Denver, a good man who respected her skill and independence. Thomas showed every sign of becoming as fine a rancher as his father, with Xavier's steady temperament and Delilah's head for business. Rose surprised everyone by developing a talent for drawing and painting, capturing the beauty of the ranch and the mountains in stunning detail. The ranch prospered, growing into one of the most successful operations in the county. Xavier paid off the bank loan, expanded their land holdings, and built a larger house with enough room for the whole sprawling family to gather. But Delilah always had a soft spot for the little cabin where they had first lived, where she had fallen in love with her husband, where their first child together had been born. Xavier kept it maintained, and sometimes on warm summer evenings they would walk down there together, away from the bustle of the big house, and sit on the porch in the twilight. "You ever regret it?" Delilah asked one such evening when they were both in their 50s, their hair streaked with gray, their faces lined with years of sun and laughter. Taking in a desperate widow and her children, Xavier pulled her close against his side. "Not for one single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I was not part of your plan, especially because you were not part of my plan, life has a way of surprising us with what we need, even when we do not know we need it." He kissed the top of her head. "I needed you, Delilah. I just did not know it until I saw you on that road." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night around them. Cattle lowed in the distance, a horse whinnied, someone laughed in the bunkhouse. This was home. This was family. This was love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings into something stronger than Delilah had ever imagined possible. She thought of the woman she had been that day, frightened and desperate and alone. That woman could never have imagined this life, this happiness, this deep, abiding love. She had thought her life was over, that she had nothing left but survival. But Xavier had seen something in her that day, had offered his hand and his trust and eventually his heart. And she had been brave enough to take what he offered, to risk believing in second chances. "What are you thinking about?" Xavier asked softly. "How grateful I am," Delilah said, "for everything, for you, for our family, for this life we have built together." "I am the grateful one," Xavier said. "You took a chance on a cowboy who barely knew how to propose properly. You made me a better man, Delilah. You made me whole." She turned in his arms and kissed him, tasting love and promise and all the years they had shared. They had been through hard times and good, had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical, and had emerged stronger for it. As they walked back to the main house, hand in hand in the gathering darkness, Delilah felt a profound sense of peace. This was where she belonged, with this man in this place. She had found her home not in a building or a town, but in Xavier's heart, and he in hers. The future stretched before them, full of grandchildren to spoil and the ranch to continue building and quiet evenings on the porch. Full of love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something that would outlast them both, living on in their children and grandchildren and the legacy they had built together. Delilah Harper Owens had been evicted with her daughters, had stood on a dusty road with nothing and no one. And a cowboy had stopped and said her needles could work at his ranch. It had been the beginning of everything, a partnership, a marriage, a family, a love story for the ages. And as Xavier held the door open for her, his eyes warm with love in the lamplight, Delilah knew she would choose this life, this man, this love, over and over again, for all the days that remained to them and beyond. Years continued to pass in a gentle rhythm of seasons and celebrations. The ranch that Xavier had built and Delilah had helped strengthen became a cornerstone of the community. They employed dozens of men over the years, and Xavier had a reputation for fair treatment and honest wages. More than one young cowboy got his start at the Owens Ranch and went on to build his own success elsewhere, always crediting Xavier with teaching them not just about cattle, but about integrity. Delilah's sewing skills, which had been the initial reason for her place on the ranch, evolved into something more. She began making clothes not just for the ranch hands but for families in town, building a small but profitable business on the side. She trained other women in the craft, passing on the skills her mother had taught her, helping widows and struggling mothers find a way to support themselves. It was a way of paying forward the help Xavier had given her, and it brought her deep satisfaction. Their children grew and flourished in ways that filled both parents with pride. Sarah and Pete's ranch, started with help from Xavier, became successful in its own right. Their 3 sons were growing into fine young men, and Sarah often told Delilah that she hoped to have the kind of marriage her mother had found, built on partnership and love. Emma's talent with horses became renowned throughout Colorado. She and her husband developed a breeding program that produced some of the finest working horses in the territory. They had 2 daughters who inherited their mother's fearlessness and skill. Thomas took over more of the daily operations of the ranch as Xavier aged, and he proved to be a natural leader. At 25, he married a schoolteacher from Montrose, a bright young woman named Catherine who brought her own strengths to the family. They settled in a house built on ranch land, and their first child, a daughter, arrived the following year. Rose, always the artistic one, struggled to find her place in the practical world of ranching. When she was 20, a traveling artist came through Montrose and saw her work. He helped her get a showing in Denver, and her paintings sold well. She eventually moved to the city to pursue her art seriously, but she came home often, and her paintings of ranch life decorated the walls of the family home. Xavier and Delilah watched their children's successes with quiet satisfaction, knowing they had given them something precious, a solid foundation of love and security from which to build their own lives. On their 20th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. 3 generations filled the house and spilled out into the yard. Grandchildren ran and played, their laughter echoing off the mountains. The women worked together in the kitchen, preparing a feast, while the men tended to the grilling of beef from the ranch's own herd. As evening fell and the party moved into full swing, Xavier pulled Delilah aside. They walked together to the old cabin, now used for storage but still standing solid and true. 20 years, Xavier said, leaning against the porch railing. It has gone by in the blink of an eye. And yet it feels like I have known you my whole life, Delilah said. She was 47 now, her dark hair liberally threaded with silver, her face lined from years of sun and smiles. She had never felt more beautiful than when Xavier looked at her with eyes still full of love and desire. I have been thinking about that day I found you on the road, Xavier said. Do you know what made me stop? You said you remembered your own mother struggling, Delilah said. That was part of it, but there was something else. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers in the familiar gesture that still made her heart skip. I saw you standing there, holding your head up despite everything, protecting your daughters, refusing to break. I saw strength and grace and courage. I saw a woman worth knowing. And I am so grateful I trusted my instinct to stop and offer help. I was terrified of you at first, Delilah admitted. A strange man offering help, I thought there had to be a catch. There was a catch, Xavier said with a smile. You caught my heart and I never got it back. Good, Delilah said, because you caught mine too, and I have no intention of asking for it back. They kissed in the twilight, the sounds of their family celebrating in the distance, and Delilah felt the same flutter of excitement she had felt 20 years ago when he had first kissed her. Some things, she had learned, only got better with time. Back at the party, their children and grandchildren had gathered around the tables laden with food. Xavier was called upon to say grace, and he stood at the head of the table with Delilah beside him, looking out at the faces of the family they had built together. Lord, we thank you for this food, for this family, for this life, he said, his deep voice carrying across the yard. 20 years ago, you brought my Delilah to me when we both needed each other most. Every day since has been a gift. We have been blessed beyond measure, and we are grateful. Amen, came the chorus of voices. The party went late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Ben, now retired but still sharp as ever, told tales of the early days of the ranch, making everyone laugh with his descriptions of Xavier's attempts at cooking before Delilah arrived. We nearly starved, Ben said, shaking his head. Or we would have if we had not all learned to cook in self-defense. It was not that bad, Xavier protested. It was worse, Carlos chimed in. Your coffee could strip paint. The good-natured ribbing continued, and Delilah watched her husband take it with grace and laughter. He was secure enough in himself to be the butt of jokes, confident in what he had built and the respect he commanded. Later, as they lay in bed in the large house that had replaced the cabin as their primary home, Xavier pulled Delilah close. Thank you, he murmured into her hair. For what? For saying yes, for taking a chance on me, for building this life with me, for loving me. Always, Delilah whispered. I will always love you. They had many more years together, watching their grandchildren grow and eventually great-grandchildren arrive. The ranch passed to Thomas, who ran it with the same integrity his father had shown, and it continued to prosper. Xavier lived to see 82 years, his mind sharp until the end, though his body finally gave out. He died peacefully in his sleep with Delilah beside him, having lived a full and satisfying life. Delilah mourned him deeply, but she did not regret a single day of their time together. She had loved 2 husbands, but Xavier had been the love of her life, the man who had saved her and then shown her what true partnership could be. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, still sewing almost until the end. When she passed at 84, it was quietly and without fuss, slipping away in her sleep much as Xavier had. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery in Montrose, their headstones simple but solid, like the lives they had lived. The inscription on Delilah's stone, chosen by her children, read, Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she turned despair into hope. And Xavier's, beloved husband, father, grandfather, he saw need and offered help. The ranch continued through the generations, each adding their own contributions, but never forgetting the foundation that Xavier and Delilah had laid. The old cabin was eventually restored and preserved as a family landmark, a reminder of humble beginnings and the power of kindness. Sarah's great-great-granddaughter, researching family history a century later, found letters Delilah had written to a friend in her later years. In one, written on their 40th anniversary, Delilah had reflected on the day she was evicted. I thought my life was over. I stood on that road with my girls and no hope at all. Then a cowboy stopped and offered his hand, and everything changed. People speak of love at first sight, but ours was different. It was respect at first sight, friendship over time, and love that grew from truly knowing each other. Xavier saw me at my lowest and helped me rise. I saw him as a lonely man building a dream and helped him make it real. Together we built something neither of us could have achieved alone. That, I think, is what real love is. Not fairy tale magic, but two people choosing each other every day and building a life together. I have been blessed beyond measure. The letter captured the essence of their love story: practical beginnings, deep friendship, abiding love, and a legacy that outlasted them both. In the modern age, the Owens Ranch still operated, now a sprawling enterprise that had adapted with the times but never lost sight of its roots. Every generation learned the story of Xavier and Delilah, the cowboy who offered help and the seamstress who had the courage to accept it. It became a family legend, told and retold, adapted and embellished, but always returning to the truth at its core. That kindness and courage can change everything, that love can grow from the most unlikely circumstances, and that building a life together is the greatest adventure of all. The old cabin stood as a monument to that truth, carefully preserved, occasionally open for family gatherings where the youngest generation could touch the walls and walk the floors where their ancestors had fallen in love. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light slanted just right through the cottonwood trees, people claimed to see two figures sitting on the cabin porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, well, no one really questioned it. Some loves are strong enough to echo through time, and the love of Xavier and Delilah Owens was certainly one of those. Their story began with an eviction and an offer of work, with needles and thread and a cowboy's kindness. It grew into a love that sustained them through decades, a partnership that built an empire, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And at its heart was a simple truth, that sometimes salvation comes not with trumpets and glory, but quietly, in the form of a stranger who stops and says, "You look like you could use some help." Delilah had needed help that desperate day in 1882. Xavier had offered it freely, asking nothing in return. And from that simple act of human decency had grown something beautiful and enduring. In the end, it was not just a story about a seamstress and a cowboy. It was a story about second chances, about the courage to trust, about building something meaningful from broken pieces. It was about love in all its forms. Romantic love, yes, but also the love of family, the love of the land, the love of honest work and shared purpose. It was, in short, the best kind of love story. One grounded in reality but reaching toward something transcendent. One that acknowledged hardship but never lost sight of hope. One that ended not with a kiss and credits but with a life fully lived and a legacy that would endure. Xavier and Delilah Owens had lived, loved, worked, struggled, triumphed, and eventually passed on as all people do. But what they built together, the family and the ranch and the love that sustained it all, that lived on. And every time a member of the Owens family extended a helping hand to someone in need, every time they chose partnership over pride, every time they built instead of tore down, they honored the memory of the cowboy and the seamstress who had started it all on a dusty road in Colorado in 1882. That was their true legacy, more lasting than land or cattle, or even the beautiful ranch house that crowned the property. They had shown, through their lives and their love, that ordinary people doing ordinary kindnesses could create something extraordinary. And that was a legacy worth preserving, worth celebrating, worth passing down through the generations. The story of Xavier and Delilah Owens became more than family history. It became a reminder that in the hardest moments when all seems lost, sometimes help arrives in unexpected forms. That courage means accepting help when it is offered and offering it freely when others need it. That love is built, not found, created through daily choices to see and value each other. Their love story, which began with an eviction and an offer of work, with Needles finding purpose at a ranch, became a testament to the enduring power of human connection, of kindness, of two people who chose each other and then chose each other again every day for the rest of their lives. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth living up to. And so it endured, passed from generation to generation, a love story for the ages, grounded in the red dirt of Colorado and reaching toward something eternal.